Well, the US President Joe Biden is expected to arrive in Israel shortly as part of a diplomatic mission amid growing concerns over the conflict. Biden is expected to spend part of today in Tel Aviv for talks with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to help in the safe release of hostages being held by Hamas and the growing humanitarian crisis in the Middle East.
Well, President Biden was then expected to travel on to neighbouring Jordan for talks about accelerating humanitarian assistance into Gaza. However, this stop was cancelled after the strike on the Al-Ali hospital in Gaza City, which Palestinian officials are blaming on Israel. But Israel denies that and is blaming it on the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group.
Well, as President Biden left Washington, D.C., White House spokesperson John Kirby told reporters that Biden will pose tough questions in meetings with Israeli leaders.
He's said to be outraged by the explosion at a Gaza hospital that killed, we think, around 500 people, and stated he had directed his national security team to gather information about what exactly happened.
Well, political analyst Eric Ham joins us live from Washington. And Eric, I suppose it's very difficult. Before Joe Biden set off last night, much of the discussion was that this was an Israeli strike on this hospital. But now it seems like the discussion has moved. The Israeli Defense Forces have been publishing information online suggesting that actually this was a misfired Hamas rocket. Might it be the case that Biden's cancelled meeting with the Jordanians, with the Palestinian authorities, could they be back on the table, or is this a half-scuppered visit?
Well, look, what certainly happened at that hospital is certainly, I think, catastrophic and damaging, and it certainly raises the stakes for President Biden's visit. But the United States has been a material supporter not only of Israel, but certainly of Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and other countries in the region, including Egypt. And so I think if the president is traveling to an active war zone, those countries need to actually be there to meet with the president, particularly given that he is placing all of his political capital on this situation. By traveling to the region, President Biden is taking ownership of this. And this is very high risk with very low reward. And I think what we're seeing now is President Biden has got to be able, since he's owning this situation, he's got to be able to walk away with some clear safeguards or clear safeguards from many of these nations that he can somehow tamp down on the rising escalation that's taking place in the region.
There was some speculation that he'd only agreed to this visit with some sort of expectation of a result, whether that be in the ceasefire or the opening of the Rafah crossing to allow aid into the area and some Western citizens out of Gaza. Are those hopes, do you think, dashed somewhat by the breaking news overnight and the quite unequivocal response from the Arab world, with particularly the King of Jordan saying, I'm not even going to meet with you now?
Well, yeah. And, look, the United States just last year signed a $10 billion aid agreement with Jordan that they will provide this much aid over the next 7 years. So the president is carrying a very big stick. And I think at any time the president can also cut off that spigot of aid, not only to Jordan, but to other nations. And so President Biden, we know that President Biden has always, said one thing in public and did something very different in private. And the president certainly doesn't want to be seen as chiding or being critical of these leaders publicly. But I think now, given the fact that this is a war and there's growing concern that this could escalate, President Biden has got to really take this by the reins and take ownership. And he's got to be very forceful, even with countries, with leaders, the King of Jordan as well. Because, again, the United States is not coming here with hat in hand. The United States is a material supporter of many of these nations. And the president needs to actually make that clear, that there is some level of concern. And there are things that the president wants from these nations and also from Benjamin Netanyahu. And we know that relationship has certainly been tense. But right now, the president has got to be able to call in those chips, particularly given the fact that the United States has expended billions of dollars over these last few years in the region.
I suppose back at home, Biden's thinking about his own political situation, the accusations that he's a sleepy president, that he's someone that's not engaged, not involved, not hosting as many press conferences, not travelling as much as his predecessors. Do you think that perhaps that context made this trip inevitable? Would he have looked weak? Would he have looked lazy without it?
Well, I do believe that the fact that he is going to his second war zone in this year, I think it speaks to the fact that the president now is looking to change the narrative to show that he's actively engaged, he's actively involved. But the president needs more than a photo op. I mean, we saw that hospital, the carnage there. And also, too, now the president's got to be able, if the United States is going to continue to showcase itself as the world superpower, President Biden has got to act like it. He's got to be able to get those extractions from these world leaders while he is there. He's got to be able to say to Benjamin Netanyahu what he wants, and Benjamin Netanyahu has got to give President Biden what he wants. And otherwise, he could walk away, I think, with that same narrative as a feeble man who can't get what he wants on the world stage because he's too old and he's too feckless and unable to get these things done at a time when the world needs America to be engaged.
OK, Eric Ham, political analyst, joining us from Washington. Thank you very much indeed.